This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. The show starts off with David Schemm, Kansas Farm Service Agency State Executive Director, as he explains grassland CRP, livestock forage program, and how communication happens between counties and the capital. Romulo Lollato, K-State professor in agronomy and wheat production specialist, continues the show, sharing insight from the 2026 Kansas Wheat Tour that is happening this week across Kansas. Brad White, Bob Larson, Phillip Lancaster, and Scott Fritz with the Beef Cattle Institute in the show with part of their Cattle Chat podcast, where they discuss causes of diarrhea in calves. That and more is coming up ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our Wednesday show with an update from the Kansas Farm Service Agency. And today we're joined by State Executive Director of the Kansas Farm Service Agency, David Schemm. David, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Shelby. Good to be here. And as always, it's a wonderful springtime of the year in Kansas. Always love the springtime and the new season, new calves, new livestock out there, and crops getting put in the ground and coming up.
Absolutely. And something that has opened up recently with the Farm Service Agency, grassland CRP.
Yeah, absolutely. So, many of our producers out there have CRP acres enrolled in there. And just from a high level view, Shelby, I just simply emphasize that, kind of three general buckets when we start talking about CRP for our producers is our continuous program, which a lot of times continuous, like a lot of people associate with a little bit longer term contracts, up to 15 years, can be targeted a little bit more towards grass waterways, various things like that. General CRP, which is typically a little bit more along the 10-year line there, but again, a little bit more general broad acres sign up. And then, like you mentioned, opened up here May 4th is the grassland CRP, and that's basically grassland, pasture, various areas of grass that can be signed up into that CRP program there. So again, it opened up here May 4th, goes through the end of the month, May 29th. Within all these CRP acres, there is an overall cap, Shelby, of 27 million acres nationally there. And so, right now we've been running along right at about 26.2 million acres currently enrolled. So there's a little bit of a cap to that could still possibly be added as we look underneath these various programs and producers try to sign up there for them. So grassland CRP, to help producers maybe have that high 100,000 foot view of it, Shelby, is again, it can be pasture when they sign up. Again, it's targeted towards, the preservation and helping us to do a better job of conserving that grass. A lot of times what producers associate with is that go in there and grazing plans are developed based upon that area there. And then producers will follow those grazing plans to qualify. And then we'll issue a payment towards that producer for following those grazing guidelines there. So again, if they think this is something that they're interested in and apply for them, definitely encourage them to go into the county office, talk to them about the grassland CRP. That sign up is open. We earlier on already had signups for both the continuous and general program there for producers there. Those signups have already ended on there, and a lot of those results offers have been batched. And some of those notifications have been sent out to producers on acceptance into those programs there. This year alone, Kansas has 118,000 acres of CRP expiring this year. So again, based upon how many acres that we have available, what acres are enrolling out there, there's probably close to almost 2 million acres, 1.9 million acres available for all the CRP signups there. So again, if there's interest there in that grassland CRP, if that's something that producers think will get in there to the local county office and talk to them on it. And as always, go to Farmers.gov, additional information on there.
For Kansas producers enrolling in grassland CRP, just looking at some data, is it usually spread across the whole state, or do you see it more heavy in certain areas?
I do see a fair amount of spreading across the state there. Probably definitely see a little bit more of in the western part of our state as far as interest in the grassland CRP there. Just because of sometimes of various qualifications or what we call EBI or Environmental Benefit Index there's some targeted areas there that we can have higher interest in it. One of the areas is the lesser prairie chicken area there. We have a defined area there, and a lot of times in that area, there can be additional incentives associated with that for producers who sign up in that area that sometimes they will be interested in signing up for the grassland CRP in those areas there. So again, because of that area, the location of that, the lesser prairie LPC, a little bit more in that western part of the state, some of those areas that we see a greater interest.
Another thing producers might be keeping an eye on, livestock forage program. And what is this?
So the livestock forage program, and I know the state has gotten some rains in areas that's been really good rains. I know there's areas that probably had almost, I've heard reports of here several weeks ago, areas getting, 10 inches of rain overnight or whatever. But I do definitely know of areas there that have only received 20, hundreds, maybe a half inch over the area there. And unfortunately, we need a lot more rain in some of those areas there. But the livestock forage program is basically compensates producers for that loss of forage due to drought there. And that when they have those losses there, they can definitely come into the county office and report those losses there based upon a drought. What are those drought qualifications there? Shelby, it's pretty simple there. Their county needs to be in a D2 for at least 4 weeks. Or if their county, somewhere in their county gets a D3 level, they qualify for LFP or livestock forage program there. Really strongly encourage our producers. We've already had 9 counties this year qualify for LFP there, and let's hope that we don't have any more, and obviously rains come in there. But I would strongly encourage producers who have had that level hit there for their county there to go in again, talk to their county office and talk with them. One of the things that we need is what their livestock numbers were, obviously, for impact that they had on them there. And a lot of times it's a lot easier when that information is fresh in their mind to get in there and report it to the county office. They do have until I believe it's March of the following year to report it. But again, I'm going to really say, when you have those numbers, that inventory, and whether you have those preg check numbers down, written on a piece of paper, whatever like that, it's always a good time to go in there and talk to the county office so that you can report those numbers accurately and they can get you put into the system there on that.
And thinking about the Farm Service Agency, recently you had a trip to DC, and what was that for?
So I had the opportunity here just recently to spend the week in DC and sit down with the deputy administrator and the administrator. And again, as always, part of what our focus here is to continue to ensure that not only do we continue to deliver great quality service to our producers, our customers out there, but even looking at ways that we can improve it and do a better job, but also make sure we're helping our employees out there and helping them to deliver those programs out there. It was a great week, great time spent in a lot of meetings. It was a lot of work, long days. I think I spent anywhere from 11 to 12-hour days in the Witten building there at USDA, and quite the honor. The secretary was, and it was a small group of SEDs that was able to go back there. 10 SEDs representing various areas of the country were able to go back there. And definitely one of the highlights, Shelby, was being able to sit down with the secretary and actually being able to spend just a little bit of time with her and talking with what her vision is and things that we can make sure we're doing and are doing to deliver those programs to our producers out there.
What impact do you see conversations that maybe you're a part of or other SEDs are a part of that happen in Washington, D.C., come back to having an impact of what's happening in states?
A lot of times I think one of the concerns I'd have to definitely make sure that I would highlight on this, Shelby, and it's a great question, because one of the topics of discussion is that decisions that they're making in DC, based upon input and everything like that, that truly they want to make sure that we have a positive impact for our producers out there, to make sure, and helping FSA to make sure that we do deliver programs, effectively, accurately, and quickly to our producers out there. So I think that was just definitely a high priority, and was communicated, is making sure that we're doing things that sees an impact out there on county offices. You're exactly right. Those conversations, and a lot of times, Shelby, it's amazing to me this last week here, and being able to interact there, that a lot of those great ideas and what we were vetting and talking about out up there as ways that we're making sure we're doing a good job and can do a better job, come out of the county offices. This is not something necessarily people being removed at a national level, but they're coming up out of the national office, being evaluated and looked at there, and then, finding ways that we can deliver to those producers. That's what the secretary is about. That's what the president about, is making sure that we're doing the best job we can to deliver to the programs as promised, and we will deliver.
David, can you remind us where people can find more information about the Farm Service Agency?
Absolutely, Shelby. Go to Farmers.gov. Information is in there. As always, producers can go into their county office there. And as always, I would say, producers, make sure you get to Farmers.gov or login.gov. Get that authority to be able to get in there, and you'll find a lot of neat tools there that FSA can help you.
David, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Thank you, Shelby.
That was State Executive Director of the Kansas Farm Service Agency, David Schemm. As he mentioned, you can find more information by going online to Farmers.gov. Once again, that is Farmers.gov. We're cutting to a short break now, but stick around because we have more for you up ahead.
You're tuned in to Agriculture Today with K-State Professor in Agronomy and Wheat Production Specialist Romulo Lollato. Romulo, thanks for taking the time to join us today.
Thanks, Chevy. As always, great to be here.
The Kansas Wheat Tours just kicked off last night in Manhattan, Kansas. What is that, and what are people out there doing?
So the Kansas Wheat Tour is that annual event where a lot of industry folks that are associated with wheat somehow get together to go around the state and to have an idea of what the wheat crop looks like, and perhaps to have an idea of what to expect regarding quality coming up of that harvested wheat crop. So industry folks here include, from milling and baking to news reporters, to people involved in trading of those commodities, and of course farmers that participate in that as well. So it's quite a diverse group regarding who is participating in that, and it's a great educational opportunity for us to really, teach some of these folks who are related to the wheat industry, but they sometimes have never stopped and going into a wheat field in their life. So it's a really good educational opportunity for us in extension to be able to visit with them.
And we started out at Manhattan and then kind of made our way west today. What were some of those first fields like?
Yeah, there are 6 routes, right, in the tour. The northernmost ones, in the first day, all of them leave Manhattan and they end up in Colby in the end of the day. But the northernmost one goes in the southernmost route, counties in Nebraska. And then we go on Highway 36, Highway 24, and so on, right? So 6 routes that cover the entire northern half of the state. A lot of the cars were reporting today, as soon as they were leaving Manhattan, that crops were probably in a decent condition. Kind of the best sampled fields were either around that eastern Kansas, northeast Kansas, right, or some irrigated field out west. And then conditions kind of went downhill from there, right? So that's kind of a general overview of what was reported today from those cars, right? A total of 176 stops were done in day one. In those stops, we go out in those fields and we try to make a yield estimate of that particular field. the average of all those near 200 stops that were done in a day was close to 38 bushels per acre for the northern half of the state. And that compares to an estimate that the USDA currently released today of 37 bushels per acre. So it was actually very close in terms of what was reported from the tour versus what was reported by the USDA. And it was interesting, Chevy, to notice the range of yields that were reported by the cars as well. It went from 1 bushel per acre, right, in fields that were most likely be abandoned, and really with nothing in terms of yield potential right now, to north of 100 bushels per acre in those fields that were irrigated. But again, as an average for this first day, 38 bushels per acre, that compares to about 60 plus bushels per acre average last year. So just a year ago, average of those same routes was not quite double, right? But it goes to show how stressed out the crop is this season and the limited yield potential that we have now. It's also important to remember that this 38 is the potential that the crop has today. And many things can happen from here until harvest, and none of them are really good for the crop in terms of nothing is going to really increase that yield potential, right? If we have cool and moist conditions through harvest, perhaps we can reach that yield potential, right? It's kind of what is out there now. The problem is that we have a week ahead of us that has windy and hot conditions forecast, and that's going to continue taking its toll on the yield and likely on the quality of the crop, depending on what we mean by quality there, right? So again, that's a snapshot of what the Kansas crop is looking today. Our number came very close to the USDA number, so that makes us kind of feel comfortable about the number that came out from the tour today.
And while we were on our trip, we had the opportunity to kind of stop and meet with some farmers and have lunch with them. What were some concerns that they had maybe with their specific fields or varieties?
Yeah, so the route that we were in, right, we were pretty much going from Manhattan to Abilene and Abilene south, and then on K4 all the way west to La Crosse, and then going up north and from there west to Colby, right, to Rooks County, and then from there west to Colby. So some of the things that we saw and that was confirmed by the farmers, and farmers bring really a different perspective to that, right, was drought stress, number one limitation for the wheat crop this season, absolutely by far. Very short boot height, 12-inch crop with a very limited yield potential that was originally limited by the drought. We're also seeing a very thin wheat crop that is combination not only of that drought that has been prolonged through the spring here, but also because of that freeze damage that the crop had in around March or so. That was a very, very cold spell during March that really peeled back a lot of the leaf area the crop has, and most likely than not also a lot of those primary tillers, right? So kind of like really holding the crop back. So drought in a very thin crop was the story of that route. In addition to that, we also saw quite a few whiteheads, and those whiteheads were primarily freeze damage, right? So that was kind of widespread throughout that route that we were at. And that freeze damage was actually now the freeze that happened in the middle part of April there. So that would actually be a freeze that would have hit the crop more around that heading stage, beginning of flowering stage, and really a lot of just sterile heads out there. So the heads might even be there, but once you try and count the number of grains that is there, they're just not there. You can really tell that the freeze damage has taken a toll on the crop as well. And then one disease that we're seeing this year quite a bit is Fusarium crown rot, which typically appears in this dry season. So we're seeing quite a bit of that as well, kind of widespread throughout the region. And just more recently here towards the western part of the state, in this last week or so, we heard reports that wheat streak mosaics are really picking up as well. Now, that's a bit of the condition of the route where we're at. And as you asked, right, what the growers were kind of reporting, it was actually very interesting. We had the chance to visit with a couple of different growers throughout this route today. One of them showed us two kind of neighboring fields. One of them was a field of wheat that was on a long fallow, so on a summer fallow, planted after sorghum on the last year. And that field probably had a 20, 25 bushel per acre yield potential. right? And neighboring there, just a mile down the road, was a field of wheat planted after alfalfa that was pretty much zeroed out. We did some yield estimates, really nothing out there, so we're really showing the impact that cropping systems have in the productivity of the crop right now. That farmer also mentioned that this year it is probably the earliest wheat crop that he has seen in his entire life, and probably one of the shortest wheat crop that he has seen in his entire life. Likely not the driest, but the shortest and the earliest crops. That was the report from one of the farmers. Then the other farmer that we visited made a couple of interesting comments as well. One of them was regarding custom harvesters. He hires those harvesters every year, and they typically start in Texas, come up to Oklahoma, and then to Kansas. And they were mentioning to him that particular crew, at least, they don't have anything to cut in Oklahoma or in Texas. They're actually starting their work in Kingman, Kansas this year, and just going north from there, which really gives us an indication of how much wheat area is going to be abandoned in Oklahoma and Texas, or whether it's going to be grazed out or sprayed out, right? But essentially, wheat area that is not going to be harvested, again, just because of these very, very tough conditions that the crop has been through.
So tomorrow and the next couple of days, as you make more stops, not sure exactly how many stops you're going to be making, but I'm assuming several more, are you expecting to hear some of the similar regards and comments?
Well, I think that for tomorrow, based on what I've been hearing, right, from growers out there, so tomorrow we're going to leave from Colby, and we're going to go west and south from here, and then once we get to the southwest corner of the state, we turn east and go all the way to Wichita. So it's a pretty long drive tomorrow through an area of the state where it's supposed to be really, really tough conditions, right? So what I would expect tomorrow is to see quite a bit of abandoned wheat fields, especially the route that goes through Oklahoma, but really in southwest Kansas. So expect to see quite a bit of a very limited yield potential resulting in these abandoned wheat fields. And I'm very curious to see what I can learn from this recent development of wheat streak mosaic virus. Again, the crop is very drought stressed, but we're hearing reports here in western Kansas that entire fields are kind of turning yellow with the wheat streak mosaic virus. I have not had a chance to go into these fields yet, but I think that tomorrow is something that I'll be really keeping a close eye on.
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Well, just looking forward to these, and if you come across a car on the road in one of your fields doing a yield estimate, please come by, stop. We love to chat and to learn from you as well. The farmers really give a great perspective when they stop by and they give their background to these folks from the wheat industry who are here visiting Kansas and stopping by and just seeing the wheat state firsthand.
Romulo, thanks for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you, Chad. I really appreciate it.
Again, that was K-State Wheat Production Specialist Romulo Lollato as he talked about the Kansas wheat tours and what we're seeing across Kansas.
You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we conclude our Wednesday show with part of the Beef Cattle Institute's Cattle Chat podcast. Today, we're joined by Brad White, Bob Larson, Phillip Lancaster, and Scott Fritz.
Let's talk diarrhea, Bob. I know this is one of your topics, and I'll bring it up because the question is coccidiosis. Yeah. And coccidiosis can cause diarrhea. It's one of the things we think about. Sometimes we'll have that bloody diarrhea that occurs. And specifically, they said, what do I do to prevent this? Where does it start? Is it in the soil? I've heard that maybe I should lime the soil. So I'm going to start. First question, where does coccidia come from? Does it come from the soil?
Yes, that's at least part of the answer. It's actually a really common organism. It's a little tiny organism, and basically all cattle carry a certain load of coccidia. I don't think it'd be possible to completely eliminate coccidia from the digestive tract of cattle. So it's in cattle, so it comes out their manure, and then it survives in the soil for quite a long time. So in a way, yes, it does come from the soil. In fact, a lot of times when we see our biggest problems, stereotypically, it would be a muddy lot, where you're not getting good, drainage. The organism is in a wet, moist environment, and it can do great there. It's going to survive really well. And so yes, there's some things we can do from a lot management. So things like keeping the mud down, scraping, those types of things. Lime has been tried because theoretically it should work. It's just real hard to make that practically be there long enough to really change an outcome. So biggest problem in recently weaned calves, they're changing diet, going through some stress, those types of things. That's when we most commonly see it. There are some feed additives, a couple of different feed additives that will help control it, and we do try to control the mud so that you just have less exposure.
Yeah. So Phillip, he talked about feed additives, or Scott. What would you guys recommend for controlling coccidiosis?
Well, I'll let Scott handle that. But I had another thought, another comment is if we can lime the lot and we would control the coccidiosis in the soil there, but the calves are gonna pick it up from the pasture or wherever they were before, and they're just gonna bring it with them onto the new lot. And so sterilizing, so to speak, that lot surface is not necessarily preventing them from getting coccidiosis in their system because they already have it when they showed up.
They may still break with it, and you can control the environment, and good pen cleanliness is important for a variety of reasons, but it's not going to eliminate your coccidiosis problem. Scott?
I mean, I think just to summarize, a lot of that's all pathogen load, I think, at the end of the day, right? If you can keep if they're exposed to 5 million versus 50,000, that's maybe a different outcome. So product-wise, there's a number of different things. There's drugs that'll actually kill the coccidia. There's drugs that are considered coccidiostats that'll just interrupt the life cycle. So you've got things like amprolium that are meant to use for treatments. You've got things like diclofenac, which you can run through the cows and kind of clean cows up before you go to calving, so hopefully you don't get transmission to calves. And then all the ionophore compounds, at least some of those have a secondary coccidiostat label to them. So things like rumensin would have that label. So there's a number of different things, and it just depends on how it fits into your management system. So you'd work with your veterinarian to come up with an idea.
Yeah, it's just what I was going to say. Great place to work with your veterinarian. So if you've had consistent problems, you have groups of calves that have problems, it may be embedded in the herd, and you may want to, at the time of weaning, dietary transition, all those stresses, you may want to use something that would be, like we talked about, coccidiocidal, which may mean different route of administration than just putting it in the feed. Or if you're maintaining and you don't want to have problems and you haven't had big problems, our ionophores can be very helpful if we can get some of those in the ration as a coccidiostat or something that breaks that life cycle. Basically, doesn't kill them off, but keeps them from reproducing nearly as effectively.
Once again, that was the Beef Cattle Institute's Brad White, Bob Larson, Phillip Lancaster, and Scott Fritz on part of their Cattle Chat podcast. If you do have questions for this team, you can send them to bci@ksu.edu. If you would like to listen to the full podcast episode, you can go online to ksubci.org or search for Cattle Chat on your favorite podcast platform. I will link these resources in today's show notes on agtoday.net. That's all we have for you today on Agriculture Today, but we'll be back with more for you tomorrow.